It's here, guys. It's finally here. This is yet another things I didn't review video. I'm coming out with these every few months as of now, and this is the 6th one now in this little series I have going on for me. All of you who are aware of what this is, like, no shame, just skip right on to some of the things I talk about. You don't have to hear this intro. But for those of you who are unaware, like the title says, this is basically just everything I didn't review. I, on my channel, mainly do movie album reviews, occasionally maybe a TV review, EP, or other kinds of videos. I've made a couple YTPs, I did a vlog recently, blah blah blah, you get it. And this is just me sort of recapping everything I haven't made reviews for in the past 3 months. I'm putting it in order of release date. I'm gonna go though like by section, albums, movies, whatnots. And these have all been pre-recorded. They're little clips I put together for you guys to watch. The time codes are in the description box below. Of course, like, yeah, dude, skip around. Like, I know if you guys probably don't care about my thoughts on a certain thing, feel more than free to skip around as you please. And these are just my brief thoughts. They're not full fleshed out reviews. I'm not going to be giving any sort of rating to them. About 30 seconds to a minute per title, I would say, approximately. And this would be covering everything from July through September that I watched and listened to of the year 2022. And with that said, that's all I got for you guys. So here are all of my thoughts on all of this stuff. Enjoy.
So I listened to Pop Drunk Snot Bread by the band Bowling for Soup. For those of you who don't know, they had that big hit in 1985 and 2004, kind of like this pop punk anthem. And I can say with confidence after listening to this full-length album that they are a one-trick pony. They don't really have much else to offer other than that. There are even moments where they are referencing that song and the success of it, and because it was a cover as well. Yeah, just kind of a generic album from an older pop punk emo rock band. I wouldn't really say emo. And similar to the band with their album, I also don't really have much else to say in this reaction, so next. A Beautiful Time by Willie Nelson. On the whole, not too crazy about this album, but I think it works very well when Willie is talking on the themes of death and of getting older and nearing death. It makes for some actually very heart-wrenching moments, very hard-hitting tracks on the record. It's when he's talking about anything else that I'm personally just a little bit bored with this thing. There are even some covers on here that don't really do anything for me. So, mixed feelings on this one, but it's cool to see Willie still making music. Like, I'm happy that he's still doing what he loves. If he's happy doing it, then good on you. Good on you, Willie. Alright guys, I'll be honest with you. This is like my 5th time trying to do a reaction for this album. I don't know what to say about it. I didn't like it, but I didn't hate it. It's a new Soft Cell album called Happiness Not Included. If you like Soft Cell, you'll probably like it. I wasn't a fan of it. I don't know what else to say. Bye. The Deep End by Fastball. You know, I've always thought that this band fits the mold of the 90s Beatles much more than Oasis does. I wasn't really crazy about this album. Couple of decent tracks, but for the most part, it's kind of boring, uninteresting, not much really interesting going on musically or lyrically, except for one track where there's some pretty nice horns and a kind of cool jazz flair to that one. It's you know, it's one of those albums where this band just really isn't that tight anymore. I don't know, what do you want me to say? Tastes like gold. That's my gold member impression for you Austin Powers fans out there. This is a new album by the band Lit, and it pretty much sounded exactly what I would expect from one of these bands. Kind of came out of the late 90s pop punk era. And yeah, it's just one of those albums where this band is just kind of clinging on to their older sound, what got them popular in the first place. And for the most part, it's not very good. I do think it's cool though that they teamed up with Adrian Young from No Doubts. That's pretty cool, but majority of this really did nothing for me. And I especially did not like when they tried to fuse pop punk with trap. that is just such a gross sound to me. I don't understand why people like that. Peace Fly God, a mixtape by West Side Gun. I feel like one of this project's biggest strengths is also one of its biggest weaknesses, and that's kind of how sleepy and lazy and laid back this thing is. At times, it does work, and it's a good vibe, kind of like the track he did with Joey Badass on his last record. But other times, man, especially the second track on this thing, Jesus Crack, 8-minute long song, and I was almost asleep. I mean, it was just, moments on this thing are really boring, but other times they're pretty cool and they work well. So kind of a mixed bag of a release. Special by Lizzo is an album with some highlights. And, I think Lizzo always brings, if she's not bringing charisma, there's always an energy there that is undeniable. But I do think that, more often than not, this album goes for these sort of lift yourself, girl power, you can do it kind of songs, which, I'm not totally against, but I just don't think that through these anthemic pop songs is necessarily the best vehicle for her to deliver that message. I don't think it always pays off well, just my opinion. But I feel like this album really works better when it's going more towards some singer-songwriter type material. And so because of that, I kind of had mixed feelings because it was this constant push and pull of those two phases, if you will. Some great stuff on here, but just a good amount of stuff that also was just Never Slept Better by Travis McCoy. I'll get this out of the way. I think this dude is talented. I know we all kind of wrote him off as a one-hit wonder, but he can rap pretty well. He's also not a bad singer. He's a talented guy, but he also just happens to make very bland and underwhelming music, and that is kind of what you get more of with this album. Since it has been such a long time since his previous release, he is sort of approaching it with a more reflective states, and that is cool. I do think that's one of the more interesting aspects of the record, but on the whole, it still wasn't really all that great in my opinion. Hellfire by Black Midi. I think with this album, it kind of has the same strengths as it does weaknesses. The chaos and all over the place nature of it does work really well at times and in its best moments, but it also can be a bit of a detriment at times. It can feel a little bit messy, which is funny for me to say that because the best moments also do feel just crazy and chaotic. I think it's a cool album on the whole though, even though it is just ever so slightly inconsistent, but a good experience. And yeah, I mean, if you're looking for an experimental rock band to get into, Black Midi is kind of the perfect blueprint for that. So this new RZA project, this is called Bobby Digital and the Pit of Snakes, I think is a clear improvement on his previous album that he was a part of, a collaborative album. I think it is clearly better. There's a lot more diversity in this one. Really a lot of different genres, like rock, soul, R&B, funk, of course hip hop is in there as well. Very diverse sound. I will admit I'm not completely in love with it. I do have my issues, but I do think that this is an admirable album and a project for RZA to come out with, and some decent contributions as well throughout it. So even though I wasn't too crazy about it, I do think it kind of has something for everyone, really. Last Ruinas, this is a new mixtape by Rico Nasty, and I think it's a cool project. I think it is overall fine. I like some of the directions she goes with the music here. It was a bit surprising. I was definitely not expecting an acoustic cut on here or the hip house influence. I do think that it mainly suffers from a slight abundance of filler, and also I don't think that the variety in the instrumentals here always really pays off. So overall, it's an okay mixtape. I do just think that it doesn't quite stick the landing that it possibly could have. Jack White fans are really getting treated this year. This is his second full-length album released in just this year. And to me, this is almost as good, if not as good, as his previous effort with Fear of the Dawn. I would say in general, I am more of a fan of when he plugs his guitar into an electric amp, but going in this more acoustic folk direction, I think works almost as well. I was very engaged with a lot of this album, with the instrumentals, with Jack's songwriting, especially with A Tree on Fire Within. Really cool little metaphor there with that one. And yeah, it was just a pleasant listen, even a cool little sort of remake of Taking Me Back. I do prefer the original, but this one was kind of nice too. Yeah, so I mean, so far I thought Jack White really did well this year. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for your service. I'm not a fan of Mozzy. I have kind of talked some shit about him in the past. I'm just not into a lot of his music. I found him to be unoriginal and just not a very interesting artist, but this was a big improvement. This is a lot better than most of the stuff I hear from him. It's still not all that great. I still kind of came out of this not wanting to listen to it ever again, but he comes through with some really nice tracks here and there. Open Arms is a beautiful song. I think at the least you should definitely go listen to that, if not the entire record. A couple of nice features here. I felt a little bit optimistic actually coming out of this because of how much better it is than most of his other stuff, in my opinion. Intros, outros, and interludes by Domo Genesis. Not a lot to say about this one. Also, I did listen to it a little while ago, so there is a good amount of it that I don't remember. I do remember liking some songs on it though. Cool production. I guess I just wished it was a little bit longer. It's a pretty short project. But yeah, I mean, not bad overall. I look forward to seeing whatever he does next, and as he sort of keeps gaining popularity, just see where he goes from here. Not Tight by Domi and JD Beck. This was not quite the magical collaboration that I thought it would be going into it, and having heard a couple songs before the entire release, but I was pretty pleased with this overall and surprised as well. I did not know that it was mostly going to be instrumental, and with that, it actually goes over pretty well, I think. Domi and JD are both ridiculously good at what they do. JD on the drums, Domi on the keys, just holding it down the entire time. And it works well. Look, this is not the most innovative, the most mind-blowing jazz album you'll ever hear, but I think for what it is, and especially with its fusion of hip-hop and electronic music, it's not bad. The Last Slimeto by Youngboy Never Broke Again, or NBA Youngboy, whatever you want to call him. This wasn't that bad, actually. I really kind of have yet to enjoy a project from him. I've warmed up to him a little bit more, especially after listening to other artists that are kind of similar to him. But this was okay, actually. It's definitely too long, 30 tracks. You don't need that many songs. There are a lot of songs that didn't need to be here. But there are some decent tracks to be found here, some good high points. I've always thought he was a good rapper. I just wasn't as into the production side of things. But even here, like, some of the instrumentals are quite nice. There's some good ones on here. It's inconsistent, it's disjointed, it's way too long, but overall, I didn't mind listening to this, and it certainly I don't think was as boring as some of the other albums that I've heard from him. I had high hopes for this album going into it, pun intended, because some of the teasers I didn't think were that bad. I did kind of enjoy a couple of them, but holy shit, an entire album of this just did not work at all. It's just too much. Brendan Urie is a good singer. He's not bad, but oh my goodness, he is just way too over the top with his singing. And he's like trying to hit those high notes like his life depends on it. It's crazy. And I just feel like the production side of things too also tries. There's so much about this album that it's too much. It needs to be more laid back, more stripped down. I think it would have benefited from it because there are some actually pretty good hooks in this album and some decent instrumentation. It's a well-performed album, but it's just going for way too much. There's way too much dressing on it. Will of the People by Muse. I was expecting to hate this thing, and I kind of did. I really did not like this thing. The couple tracks I do kind of enjoy are more of the old Muse, more reminiscent of older albums they've made. But my goodness, a lot of this is just car commercial, hard rock. The Halloween song that's on here, I don't know what they were thinking with a lot of the choices made on this record, oh man, I don't know what happened to this band. They were, I think, pretty solid for a while, but just way off the deep end now. The Forever Story by JID, I was so looking forward to this release, and I will say, initially I wasn't too won over by the slower tracks, the sort of R&B influence. I want to say it was track 7 was one of those, but on the whole, really enjoyable album, especially that first leg, just unbelievably great songs there. Yeah, man, JID, he's just such a good rapper. I don't know what to say. He's really good, man. He's a really good writer. His flow is just super smooth, and the production was pretty fire. Like, very enjoyable album. LOUIE, a new album, and actually the first solo album by Kenny Beats. This is pretty much all instrumental, a few features here and there that were kind of surprising, actually. JP Mafia was not expecting to hear him on here. That was kind of cool though when he showed up. I think it's pretty well done on the whole. I wasn't blown away by it, but there were definitely some songs that I really liked. I mean, his production is very good. Yeah, it's a cool project, very chill, and a cool story behind it as well. He made a lot of it sort of inspired by his dad, what his dad was going through. That was cool, nice sentiment there. The Sick, the Dying, and the Dead by Megadeth, new album from these guys. This, I think, is a pretty average sounding thrash metal record to come out in modern times. There are some sick ass riffs to be found here, some great grooves. I mean, the band, I think, still plays pretty well together. They're still a pretty tight-knit collective. I just personally can't get behind a lot of these lyrics, and Dave Mustaine has never really been that great of a singer, but especially nowadays, there isn't as much attitude and personality with his vocal performances. Still though, better than I thought it was going to be. Like I said, some nice riffs here and there. Kind of a mediocre effort, I think. Very much middle of the road. Patient number 9 by Ozzy Osbourne. This definitely has its ups and downs. I'm not trying to come on here and say that it's one of the best metal albums of the year or of this decade up to this point or whatever. It's definitely a bit rocky at times, but man, I think Ozzy, for where he's at in his life, in his career, he's remaining pretty freaking consistent, which is saying a lot considering some of the stuff he's gone through lately with his health and all that. He came through with some enjoyable tracks on here. Of course, he's working with some great musicians, all of them which are very talented though. To me, Zakk Wylde though is definitely the MVP of this album. That guy can freaking shred. So yeah, I mean, I would give it a listen, honestly. I think it'll be more than what you expect from a new Ozzy record. Results Take Time, a new album from Simba. This also has DJ Drama involved with this album as well. And I gotta say, I was actually somewhat pleased with this thing. Simba, he's not the most original rapper in the world. There isn't a whole lot that is different about him. He actually reminded me a good amount of Pusha T. And it doesn't help that there's actually a track on here with Pusha T, which is really good, one of the better ones, but it was hard to tell who was who at times. But he's pretty good. He's got a good personality, and I think he provides a decent flow to the album overall. DJ Drama wasn't that annoying for most of it. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot to complain about. Wasn't blown away by it. I don't know if I'll ever revisit this again, but while I was listening, I didn't mind it. Hyper Relevisation by Eve 6. This is this band's first album in over 10 years. So I was interested to see just how it would sound if there would be any evidence of evolution in any way. And you can kind of tell that it's been a little while since this band has put together an album. They seem kind of hesitant to really do anything new. It very much plays it safe. Not like this was ever some boundary pushing band before, but Honestly, a lot of it just feels very sleepy, just very run-of-the-mill alt-rock.
Crept up the steps unquietly. I'm inept and out of breath. I need to say the game of love.
Opening the door, this is a new EP by Little Dragon. Very short, only 3 tracks long, not even 15 minutes. And I at first thought it was pretty interesting what they were doing. The first track with Jid I thought was awesome. So I was like really excited to hear the rest. The next couple tracks unfortunately didn't quite live up to that level. It's experimental, it's weird like a lot of Little Dragon stuff is. I don't think it all comes together as well though as it could have. So a cool project, but I think a little hit or miss. Ringo Starr has a new EP out, it's called EP3, and I recognize that there is a demographic of people that will really like this music and be really into it. And I have no problem with Ringo's message with this music, you know, obviously peace and love, that's kind of his thing. Awesome, you know, like I have no problem with that. You do you, Ringo. But personally, I just feel like he's really been playing it painfully safe with these recent projects he's been putting out. I'm just not into this sounds. I'm not into how predictable and cookie cutter it is. I admire what he's trying to do. It's fine. I'm just personally not really into it at all. Billy Idol has a new EP out. It's called The Cage, and in comparison to the one he came out with last year, I much more enjoyed this one. Only 4 tracks, but I did find it to be more consistently engaging as compared to his last EP. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about it. It's pretty cool. You give it a listen if you're a fan of Billy Idol.
Join with me in harmony and sing a song of laughing.
So I finally got to Kimi on HBO Max, directed by Steven Soderbergh. And this was not really what I was expecting. I wasn't expecting this sort of commentary, this social commentary on technology and I mean other things as well. It's one of those movies where on the surface you think it's about a certain thing on a certain subject matter, but it ends up having a lot more layers to it, a lot more, I guess, messages to it as well. Great filmmaking. I'm so glad Steven Soderbergh is still making movies. I know he he said he retired, but then he came back like a year later, so whatever. I'm just glad he's still making movies because he's damn good at it. So going to see this movie Poser was a kind of cool experience for me. I drove out to this theater. It's like nearly, at least 40 minutes away from where I live. A really cool theater, kind of older. And to see this movie that I didn't really know anything about, I didn't know any of the cast, I didn't know the director. And for most of it, I was enjoying it. I was enjoying this sort of indie feel, DIY aesthetic that they're going for. I liked the characters, I liked a lot of the performances, but I gotta say, this movie really falls apart in the last 20 minutes or so. There's a kind of twist that happens, which I guess you could kind of see coming, especially with the title being Poser. But it really, I think, just tanked the movie and kind of left it off on a bad taste, which is a shame because I was enjoying it, but unfortunately, the ending made me kind of feel indifferent towards the film as a whole. I was really excited to finally watch Hustle. I'm just always glad to see Adam Sandler doing something a little bit different. And this one in particular, I'm aware he's a basketball fan, so I'm sure he was very happy to do this. I saw he's a producer as well. And I thought this turned out really good. Really, easily one of the best Netflix movies of the year so far, no question. All of the NBA players in this movie, they're not real actors. Most of them, I thought, did a very good job. I loved Sandler in this movie. He gives such a good performance. And it's just a very inspiring sports drama. There isn't much new to the story. We have kind of seen this before, but it's a very feel-good movie. It does even have a couple of changes that I wasn't really expecting that kind of took me off guard. Highly recommend this one. Go check it out if you have Netflix. I think Spiderhead is okay. It's kind of mid-tier Netflix, not awful, but not one of their best movies either. There were some things I really liked about this. Performances all very solid. Very cool concept, and I think really great setup at the beginning. But I just wasn't too won over by all of the execution. think particularly with what they do with some of the characters. The way the movie wraps up, I think, is pretty messy. On the whole, though, I didn't mind it. Elvis was a slight disappointment for me, if I'm being honest. Something that just kept rolling around in my head as I was watching was that there's a lot that they could have taken out of this and trimmed down the running time quite a bit, but also there's a lot that they didn't focus on that they should have, like something that happens with his mom. She develops a drinking problem. Just things like that that they don't linger on enough. Austin Butler is amazing. He's incredible as Elvis Presley. He deserves all the hype he's getting. The style for the film that Baz Luhrmann provided here, I think sometimes works, but a lot of the time I don't know was appropriate for this kind of movie. He's definitely, I think, a good director, but I do think that his style is a bit hit or miss. So overall, this movie was okay, but I was expecting more and wanting more from it. So I would say that this has been a relatively consistent franchise up to this point. I wasn't too into the first Minions movie that came out several years ago. I like this one a lot more. This is probably, I think, the best movie in this franchise since the second Despicable Me. Yeah, I think the Minions' little antics didn't really become as grating in this one because there was so much focus on Gru and what was going on with him. There really wasn't a whole lot to it other than this thing that Gru was trying to do, and then the Minions just kind of being their normal crazy selves. But you can watch this and I think be entertained by it for the most parts. You know, there were some moments where I did kind of roll my eyes and not all the jokes landed for me, but it's fine. It's a decent installment in this franchise. So this new Thor movie, I think, is technically good. It's fine. You know, it's well done. I can see why people would like it. And overall, I would say that I did enjoy myself with this. I could see myself probably rewatching it in the future. But coming off of Thor Ragnarok and how great that was, and in my opinion, one of the best MCU movies, this was disappointing. This was a major drop from that film. I think in particular, just with the first half being so scrambled, so discombobulated, just all over the place in ways that I would explain, but I don't want to keep this reaction too long. It does pick up though in the second half. I did latch more onto the characters and to what they were going for with the story. So definitely a bit of a letdown, but it's fine. It's a watchable movie for sure. I saw the movie Fall, and this is not what I was expecting it to be. I had remembered seeing this very short trailer for it a little while back, like literally probably only 30 seconds long, just a little teaser of the kind of movie it was going to be. Basically, it's just these two girls that get stuck on top of this really freaking tall tower, like 2 times the height of the Eiffel Tower. And I think when it has those thrills, and especially with the way it's shot and the cinematography and just the way all the filmmaking comes together, it's very engaging, it's very intense. There are a lot of those tense, thrilling moments. I wasn't crazy about the story though, and as well as the characters. I wasn't too invested in them. The performances weren't that bad. Yeah, I mean, it was a fine movie. I just think that it should have gone more for those thrills rather than these kind of more emotional moments with the characters. I wasn't too into that part of the movie. I think that Look Both Ways does have a couple of good things going for it with its premise, and it's showing the two possibilities that could have happened with Lily Reinhardt's character if she were pregnant or if she wasn't, and continued to go on with her plans after college. But unfortunately, the film doesn't really have much unique or interesting to offer beyond that. It's kind of just your typical Hallmark rom-com drama BS, really. And the uniqueness of its premise only slightly elevates it above these kinds of movies. I think Beast can be a really enjoyable time, especially if you're into filmmaking and you're into direction and editing. I think you'll get a lot of enjoyment out of this because there's some very impressive one-take shots, quite a bit of them actually. I could kind of tell where they would cut, but honestly, I was still very impressed with the work done here behind the camera. Great acting as well. Idris Elba is fantastic in this. I actually did care about the characters, so when they were in danger, I was nervous at times. There's some very intense moments here. Some moments that I think are a little over the top, and yes, you've all heard this. Yes, there are dumb decisions made, but this didn't really ruin my enjoyment for the movie as a whole. Overall, I thought this was a very solid movie, very well made too. I went to go see The Invitation because why not? Yeah, it's not very good. It's extremely generic. There is a twist that happens in this movie that really did not go over well. I will say the main character, she's not bad. Performance is fine. I could kind of get behind her and sympathize with her character. But my goodness, it just doesn't offer anything new, really. And that's all there is to it. So I actually talked about this movie in the vlog that I made. By the time you're seeing this, it's about a month. Well, no, more like 3 weeks after I put out my vlog. So go check out that. I'll leave a link in the description so you can go watch that. And in the midst of it, I do talk about my feelings on this film. I think The Woman King benefits from some terrific performances from a lot of the cast. Some cool action scenes here and there, although there were a couple I think could have been done a little bit better. And a cool journey overall that I was glad to follow. A kind of a hero's journey in a way, sort of. But you know, the emotional grab of this movie, the big theme that I think will really tug a lot of people's heartstrings. For me personally, I felt almost nothing. I didn't really understand what they were going for there, and I think that might have to do with the lack of character development as well. But for the most part, I was pretty engaged with this thing. I think it's a beautiful looking movie, and overall, I mean, I was entertained for sure. It's got a cool style to it, so overall, yeah, I didn't mind it at all. I think Don't Worry Darling actually works pretty well, strongly due to the filmmaking, Olivia Wilde's direction, the cinematography, as well as most of the acting, especially I think Florence Pugh absolutely carries this film. Chris Pine also really good. And that does help the movie, and it makes it enjoyable because, you know, it is a very familiar movie. I mean, there are scenes ripped straight out of other movies, even television shows. So while it does certainly suffer from redundancy, it's well acted and I think well made overall. So I actually did enjoy it. The Pentaverate, it is really cool to see a new project from Mike Myers like this, where he's very heavily involved with the production, writing, he created it. He is kind of going back to his roots of playing all these different characters as well. I don't know how many, just a bunch of characters that he plays in the show. And, you know, it is relatively unique. There are some kind of just out of the box ideas for modern shows, especially shows that are streaming nowadays. But a lot of this, I just think, it wasn't executed right. It was incredibly unfunny as well, with exceptions to like a few moments that were kind of funny. I did not find this funny at all. I wasn't too into the direction it went. By the time it ended, I wasn't satisfied, unfortunately. I think one of the biggest problems with the amount of these MCU shows that are coming out on Disney Plus is not having to do with them being bad, but I forget about them. A lot of these shows I've kind of just forgotten about. I mean, I remember them, but I've never ever felt the desire to rewatch them again, with the exception of WandaVision and Hawkeye, and honestly now Miss Marvel. I quite enjoyed this show. I'm really into the characters in this one, the performances. I can't remember her name, I'm sorry, but the main actress, I think she does great here. I'm excited to see her in the Marvels. And I liked the family aspect of this show a lot. It's not perfect. I do think there are some issues, especially with regards to the government involvement in this series, but I think it's a really solid show in this MCU installment of Disney Plus shows. So yeah, it's pretty good.
That was a really long video, and that's actually kind of something that I want to mention before I close this video out here. Is it too long for you guys? These videos are really, really long. Like, as I kept doing them, it feels like they've pretty much been getting longer each time. I just want to know, is it too much for you guys? I have considered doing maybe like one per month, and you know, it'd be shorter videos, they'd be coming out more often. Is that something you guys would like to do? That's something I'm kind of leaning towards actually. But what I'll probably do if I do decide to go in that direction is just wait until next year, and I'll do like one more things I didn't review for the last 3 months of this year, and then start the monthly series next year. Kind of like how at the beginning of this year I said I would start doing it every 3 months, so I'll change it again next year. I'm strongly considering doing that actually, so I would love to know what you guys think about that, if you're on board with it. If you're not, any sort of feedback would be helpful for me. And beyond that, I would also just be interested to know what you guys thought about some of these titles, what your personal opinions were on any of these films or albums, etc. And just thank you so much for watching this video. See you all later. Peace out.